Southwest is in the news lately.
Dutch roll.
Douglas, we have that. Oh, there it is. So the couple things, and we're going to talk about them together. Southwest plane that did a Dutch roll. This one's probably the scarier one. It was a 737 Max. It had structural damage. It went into a Dutch roll. And what that is where you get into the yaw, and also the rolling motion kind of makes the figure eight with the wingtip. It was at 34,000 feet, Phoenix to Oakland on May 25th, but they didn't tell the NTSB until June 7th.
Yeah, good. Good.
And I think that's because it took them that long to figure out that structural damage had occurred. So it's a combination of yaw, or the tail sliding side to side, the plane rocking in a way that causes the wings to roll up and down. They didn't realize how serious it was. It's part of aerodynamics. Is that it? Okay. So they trained to recover, but the damage was described as substantial. It was to the tail fin where the power units are housed. He was baffled that the backup unit would be damaged because normally it would not be activated during a Dutch roll. They're not prone. Obviously, it's a swept wing thing. I mean, that's usually what causes that, especially at altitude. But they downloaded the data. The CVR was obviously overwritten already. Yep. There were no injuries, and they're expecting a preliminary report in 30 days. So that's part one we can talk about. Thanks, Doug. So to me, that's the scarier one, because I read something else, and it could be rumor or, not accurate, but that they actually got up to about, high angles of bank, where there was 45, 60 degrees of bank. And at altitude, now you're talking upset recoveries in an airplane like that. The airplane, they've got yaw dampers. So, it should keep it from getting into a situation like that. So I'm curious of what happens. And, the Max has been plagued with MCAS problems and all that. This seems like what are we doing? What have we yet to discover about this airplane? Because it's Frankenstein's monster. They have taken an airplane that was very short and stubby when it was first designed with very small engines, and they've stretched it. And they've added big honking engines that have changed the center of gravity. They have created all kinds of new issues that they've had to train to. And so, I don't know. What do you guys think? Skid, what's your...
Well, I mean, you would think flight tests would have discovered this when they were flight testing and all the simulations and all the stuff they do. And that, is this a one-off anomaly that something in the hydraulic actuator wasn't working properly? Maybe. I don't know. And, if it got that bad, I think it would have gotten more press, like from people in the back screaming. So somehow it didn't get to that level because it didn't make the news, right, until recently. Because it was like after the fact, the airplane's back in the chocks. Oh, by the way, we wrote it up for some problem. And I know, in today's modern jets, the system identifies problems before the pilots know. So it'll send a message to what company. The company sends you a message back, hey, is anything going on with your jet? And like, oh yeah, I got a fault indicator or something. And obviously everyone's now high, targeting Boeing for all its problems. So anything that pops up now is like, oh. So I think this is a one-off. I mean, obviously MCAS has been problematic with the mishaps they've had. I'm sorry. So this will be. They haven't any other jets do this, correct? Have you had any reports of this happening on any other Maxes out there?
No, but if you recall, early the Boeings had rudder problems. Like that killed a lot of people early on.
With a Max?
Remember US Air 427?
The
US Air jet, and then the United 73 going into Denver. They got the rudder hard over at low altitude, and it basically rolled right into the ground. But I don't.
That was like 40 years ago, right, Gonky?
Yeah,
I'm 30 years ago. Yeah, 30.
That's what
I mean. I'm talking about when you have mishaps. And you guys have been safety. What's the trend? How many airplanes have declared have this problem? You start doing the tracking. How many of this? I mean that. And if this jet is the first one in 30 years to have a rudder Dutch roll problem, something, or that is that enough to say, hey, we need to ground the whole fleet? because these things are dangerous? Or is this a one-off anomaly, like, the crash in Sioux City, right? When the three-holer MD-11 lost
DC-10.
DC-10 through a blade and lost all hydraulics. Now, God, the guys did a great job getting it down with just power. But, obviously, hey, they need to investigate it. I know Boeing's under the gun, so to speak, for having some problems, and they're going to get more viz on it now.
Yeah, swept wing airplanes, I mean, they're susceptible to Dutch roll, swept wing jets. I mean, pretty much, I think all of them out there have a yaw damper to keep that from happening. Skid, I think you're right, as far as, trying to see, is this a developing trend? What led to this? But to Mover's point, like, I also think that there's been quality control questions with regard to how the airplane's built and even like the parts from suppliers and stuff. So I think people are a little on edge. And Mover, you've said it before. It's like there's a lot of little weird things happening. It just kind of feels like, like right before the water boils, which I don't like that at all. But thankfully, the good news is they were able to maintain control of the airplane and get everybody on the ground safely, so we can have the investigation, so they can look at it and be like, we got a bad batch of yaw dampers, or this is a one-off, whatever. It was installed incorrectly, just this one. So we're going to find out. And the good news is that'll make the entire fleet safer.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. So on the Southwest side, so they had this issue, and then they also had this, and this, I really want to talk more to the media, and it's too bad we don't have this, because the Breaking Aviation, they said it came within 400 feet of slamming into the water at the coast of Hawaii following an aborted landing attempt due to bad weather conditions. Now you can go back.
Wow.
The article I read, I sent you this, Gonky, the other day. Like Chicago News says, Southwest 737 plummets from 16,000 feet to 400 feet. That's the sensationalist headline. It says you got a 4,000 foot per minute descent rate, but it only lost 600 feet. So it's Southwest 2786 dropped from an altitude of 1,000 feet to 400 feet in just a few seconds. I mean, not excusing this. I'm just saying the sensationalism of this article, not so great. So, according to Southwest Review, do we have that, Doug? Do we have the memo that came out?
It's in the share drive there. That's one of the links. Yeah.
So somehow are you not looking at it? That's it right there. So you have to click on it. So somehow an internal memo from Southwest was made. Oh, of course, it's in 1.69 font.
You're a pilot. You can read it.
Where are my reading glasses?
Well, so anyway, I'll summarize the incident. Basically, they're on approach, and the pilot flying was the first officer who was not experienced in the aircraft, and they thought, well, that'll be a good time to get some experience to fly in some challenging weather conditions.
Oh, good.
And they're on the approach, going to minimums, decided to do a go around because didn't see the runway, didn't see it, and executed the go around. First officer allegedly pushes forward, which causes them to descend to almost 400 feet before the captain says, hey, we need to go around. We need to like climb, we're already going around. We need to climb. So,
wow.
Is that it, Doug? Does it say anything else that I'm missing? I can't. There's 0% chance.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one I can read too.
I've got it right here. It says the crew briefed the entire flight at the gate, discussed the thunderstorms were developing south of their destination. The first officer also mentioned they were monitoring flight radar and noticed multiple aircraft was also performing missed approach into LIH. Even with challenging weather conditions being forecasted, the captain elected to have the FO operate the short leg to LIH to build the first officer experience. Crew reported light to moderate turbulence throughout the flight. Even with weather conditions deteriorating, the ATIS and LIH Tower reported that the weather was at or above minimums for RNAV 17 approach. Crew briefed the go-around procedures, anticipating they might not be able to see the runway. As expected, the FO did not have the runway in sight by minimums and called go around. Both pilots described the events from the first officer's go around call to the holding altitude as high workload task saturation. During the go around, the FO inadvertently pushed forward on the control column while following the thrust lever movement commanded by the autothrottle. At this point, the FO noticed the red airspeed tape pull back on the thrust levers, results in a descent. Safety data confirmed the crews received a don't sink JIPWA's oral warning, followed by pull up JIPWA's oral warning. FO later stated they did not hear the warnings due to intense task saturation. Captain assessed that the aircraft was in an undesirable state based on JIPWA's warning. The verbalized climb, turn left, immediately prompting the FO to increase thrust. The aircraft climbed aggressively during the recovery, maxing out at 8,500 feet per minute. The aircraft climbed. Neither pilot noticed activation of flap load relief from 15 to 10 degrees as a result of the increasing airspeed. Resulted in a phase 2 flap overspeed. The maximum speed recorded was 238 knots. Flaps 10 max speed is 210 knots. Phase 2 limit of 225 knots. In the aggressive maneuvers, the first officer unsuccessfully attempted to reconnect the autopilot due to the heavy control forces. Additionally, the crew exceeded the missed approach altitude by nearly 700 feet. After recovering in the hold, the crew determined the best course of action was to return to the departure airport. Second attempt, the captain flew and they landed. So the first officer was not consulted during these conversations. Later stated they wished they had spoken up about their desire not to try a second attempt. FO also clarified the integrity of the operation. The fact that they met regulatory requirements to operate were some of the reasons they did not stop the second flight to LIH. Captain elected to be pilot flying. Due to deteriorating weather, they were assigned holding en route by ATC, prompting a decision to return to the departure airport without flying the approach to LIH. The crew returned to base safely. They filed ASAPs. So that is that one. Gentlemen, go with your data. Gonky, you're probably the most current airline guy. You tell me.
I think kind of like you talked about, a little bit of sensationalism from the media. Excuse me, in my opinion. I mean, a missed approach, even the Airbus, you don't do them very often, and it can be a handful. And I could see. I mean, I've done one actual missed approach in the Airbus, and we got behind the airplane a little bit. So I mean, I read stuff like this, and challenging weather. I don't think they were as out of control as the media would like you to think. I think they got a hold of this internal narrative, whatever, and used it as news.
Yeah. So at 1,000 feet, they were at minimums. So if I remember right, because it says, I'm looking at the chart, 940, but you add 50 feet because of derived decision altitude. I feel like a nerd for knowing that.
Nerd.
Loser.
So, I mean, 1,000 feet to 400 feet. Yeah, that sucks. Here is funny. There was a comment on Twitter about how this has nothing to do with the max. This is not a max thing. This is not a max thing or whatever. Two things. One, I think it's a training thing. And I think after we just talked about the LaGuardia thing, maybe there's some stuff that needs to happen about just training on go-arounds and stuff like that. But second, I disagree that it's not a max thing. Because of the Franken Max and the design of the Max, that thing, the engines, they're powerful engines, CG, the thing wants to pitch up. Like a go-around is not a pleasant thing to do in a 737 Max. I've practiced them in the sim, I've done them in real life. And when I used to fly the 737, that was the big emphasis item, right? Because you would always worry about overspeed and flaps, shooting through altitudes, all that stuff. Like you are on the tail end holding on. If you're not ahead of the aircraft, you can easily do it. And if you remember, there was a mishap very recently, well, not very recently now, but in Houston, where was it Atlas, one of the ACMI cargo
767,
the 76, where the captain reached over, accidentally pressed toga, FO pitches up, response is to push back down, they go into the swamp.
Wow.
This is very similar in the sense that this is a very scary thing. However, I think this should never have been public. This is the whole reason we have an ASAP program is to keep things internally to protect ourselves. And the reason we have a safety department within the airlines is to protect ourselves. And there's some level of safety privilege, because if everything can become public, then I think people will be less likely to fess up and we won't get the lessons learned that we need to get. That being said, I think training needs to happen, but I go back to the terrible design of the 737 Max and the fact that they should have done a clean sheet, because I've flown now 2 fatty airplanes, and one is very, very difficult to do a go around, and one is a non-event, and all it is software. That's the only difference. Like you got big engines, you got all that stuff, and one is a software thing, and one is, you've designed the CGs in the wrong spot, and
Mhm.
it's tail heavy and it wants to pitch up, and
Right.
it pitched up. Now I want to push back down, and when you push up, now you throw throttle back, and now we're in this PIO. I just
Right.
Skid, did you fly the 7.3 Classic?
727. I was a panel at
727.
Chicago.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I totally understand. You got all that technology at your fingertips, and you're trying to do what you got to do. And whether there's a training ism at SWA or whatever, I don't know, with the go around procedures. After the LaGuardia incident, you're talking about LaGuardia, right?
yeah, where they were
LaGuardia,
off
you know,
center
where
line
they
such
off
that
center
they
line,
almost
and
yeah.
what the heck happened there. But no, I mean, I don't know. Giving the new guy, I understand giving the new guy some experience, but if the weather's that bad, captain, you do it. It's your job. You're the captain. When the weather's a little, I don't know. And now the guy's doing the best he can, right? And
I I I don't know, Skid. I mean, so you looking at the plate, it's not like so a lot of times, especially I'm sure Southwest is like this because of very few.
Mhm.
There's a HUD on the captain side. There's no HUD on the FO side.
Yeah,
There's up until actually pretty soon, from what I understand, they will be able to do auto land Cat 3. But
really.
right now, a Cat 3 approach in a 737 Max
Mhm.
or 737 is done by the captain
Right.
to 50 feet rad alt using the HUD. It's not an autopilot. It's not an auto land. They don't have that here at this airport. So,
Oh,
uh,
right,
wait,
right.
was it LAH,
LAH,
right?
is that Maui?
Uh,
Or is that
Lihu, 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 Lihu,
is that
LA.
it's not Hickam, is it? It's not Hickam.
No, it's a little island.
Oh,
All they have is the RNAV. They don't have
oh,
any other approaches. Like they've got RNAV. Oh, they do. They have an for this runway. All they have is RNAV. They have an ILS on the other side. So if
oh,
they run ILS 3.5, they could do
yeah.
this. But what I'm saying is, I don't see an issue with letting the FO fly it because it's the same
Mhm.
minimums. Like you didn't gain anything. It's good.
Okay.
I agree with that decision. I don't
Yeah.
have a problem with that because you're type rated.
Yeah.
By the time you get to the
Mhm.
right seat in a Southwest airplane,
Mhm.
you're an ATP with a type rating.
Yeah.
You should be able to handle it.
Gotcha.
Like I don't have any problem with that. The issue is the startle factor, the go around. It's much more
Mhm.
violent in real life. Like I had to go around in New Orleans in that airplane, and I just clicked everything off and just
Good.
manual.
That's
Because if you follow the guidance, that's where things happen fast. You do everything, and you're like, oh, this is too complicated. If
Mhm.
you click off everything and fly it like a real
Yeah.
airplane,
Good
it
point.
flies like a real airplane.
There you go.
But that's
Yeah.
not how we're trained. So
Awesome.
I was very surprised at the pitch up moment that happens when you do a go around with an airplane with low slung engines under the wings. I don't know about in the Boeing, but in the Airbus, even when you take off, you push forward on the stick to help keep the nose down because she wants to, you know, she wants to get the nose up. So,
Mhm.
taking an airplane like the 7.3, stretching it, putting massive engines on it that are hanging low, and kind of like you said, mover. I mean, anybody who goes in an airport, just look. They have the sticks that hold the tail of the 7.3 from sitting on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Because it is tail heavy, right? Or the CG is like it's right there, right? So, um, I mean, I Skid, I can see what you're saying. Challenging conditions, junior
Yeah.
first officer. It's like, dude, let me just do this one.
Yeah.
But I also see Mover's point where, dude, this airplane, if you read about the classic 7.3, it is a superb design for what it was designed for. The mission has changed, and
Yeah.
that airplane is no longer adequate for today's
Mhm.
narrow body, short haul mission, generally speaking.
Right. Right.
and I will add, we all make mistakes.
Oh,
Mhm.
dude.
Yeah.
It can happen to anybody,
Yep.
but for the grace of God go I. I will always say that because at this could be any one of us on any given day.
100%.
Like to err is to human. So I'm not trying to throw anybody under a bus because I think that people underestimate how serious a go around is on a 737 Max or a
Mm.
737 NG. Just I
Mm.
think it's
I mean, but the other thing is we don't train we don't train a lot to go around. We don't do go arounds a lot. That's the other thing. So it's kind of a skill.
You don't do them in real life. You do them in the sim once a
Mm.
year.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, I've done one in 5 years and it did not go per script. So it did not go as advertised. It was very sporty. And now, to me, that was shocking because I'm like, how can, coming from a fighter, I'm like, this is easy, burner, gear up, flaps up. Where am I going next? Like kind of thing. But an airliner, all kinds of, it's just amazing,
Well, it's because there's so much happening in such a short amount of time. And believe it or not, these airplanes are hugely overpowered in toga. Like when we take off, we very seldomly do max thrust takeoffs, right? You always do a derate or a standard thrust where it's a derate plus an assumed temperature or something. So like you're not getting the full, like a fighter where it's like, our takeoff today will be full afterburner question. It's like, what's the setting all the way as far as it'll go, unless you got a wingman in a formation takeoff, then you might crack it back a little bit and let them keep on. But you're not, that's toga is, you've got it. Here you go. Here's all of it.
Ludicrous speed, go.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally.
So you've got a situation you're not used to. Your immediate action, right? You got to remember. I mean, it's boldface, right? Toga, go around toga flaps 15 in the 737. So you are calling for flaps. The other girl is trying to put flaps up for you.
Yep.
You're climbing away. You're getting positive rate gear up. You're trying to remember all the things to say. You got to hit a roll mode. You got to hit a vertical mode. You got to make sure the thing's doing what you want to do. But the thing is that it's startle factor, man. You get out of your OODA loop. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you get out of that where you thought you were, it takes a second. I still blame the MAX because that thing should never have been designed. It should have been a 757. It should have been a 757 or 797. It should have been some, they kept the 737 small, some kind of intermediate jet, and then wide body.